A 19-year-old boy stepped off a plane in Barcelona with a single small suitcase, one white shirt on his back, and blood running from his nose. He had no address written down. He had no real plan. When immigration officers asked him where exactly he was going, he couldn't answer them. 9 years later, he'd be one of the most feared strikers on the planet. But that's not even the wildest part of this story. Because to understand why a teenager showed up at a foreign airport with nothing, you have to go back further. And you have to understand something most football documentaries will never tell you. This isn't really a story about football. Football is just where it happened to end up. Luis Alberto Suárez Diaz was born January 24, 1987, in Salto, a river town in northern Uruguay. He was the fourth of 7 boys, raised in the Cerro neighborhood in a house that was, by every account, loud, crowded, and short on money. His father, Rodolfo, had served in the Uruguayan army and played amateur football on the side, good enough to turn out for a local club called Deportivo Artigas. His mother, Sandra, ran the household. With 7 sons and 1 income, there wasn't much room for anything extra. When Luis was 7, the family made the move that a lot of Uruguayan families like theirs made, from the small town to the capital, chasing work. Rodolfo found a job at a biscuit factory in Montevideo. It wasn't glamorous. It paid the bills, barely. Then, when Luis was 9, his parents separated. That alone would be enough hardship for most childhood stories. This one has a second stage. It took 3 more years, but when Luis was 12, his father didn't just separate from the family. He left the house entirely. Rodolfo eventually moved on, remarried, and by most accounts stayed in touch with his kids. But at 12 years old, Luis Suárez watched his father walk out the door for good. Here's the part that gets left out of the highlight reels. Suárez himself has openly admitted what came next wasn't some clean, inspiring story of a kid who channeled his pain straight into greatness. It wasn't. By his own account, his early teenage years were turbulent, bad company, drinking, a kid with no real direction, angry at the world for reasons that had nothing to do with football. Somewhere in there, to help his mother make ends meet, he was out sweeping streets, just a boy with a broom, doing whatever work he could find. His family couldn't always afford football boots. He played barefoot in the street more often than not, saving the 1 pair of shoes he owned for school. This is not the story of a disciplined kid who always knew exactly what he wanted. This is the story of a kid who was, by his own description, kind of a mess. Then, at 15, he met a girl named Sofia Balbi. She was 13. By his own account, she was the first thing that actually settled him down. The relationship started the way most teenage relationships do, stolen moments, nothing serious. But it became serious fast. People who trained alongside him at the time have said it plainly. The wild kid, the one always on the edge of trouble, started to calm down. He credits her, directly, with making him understand for the first time that football might actually be something worth taking seriously. For a couple of years, that was the story. A rebel, settling down, starting to take his one real talent seriously. Then it fell apart. In the early 2000s, Uruguay's economy collapsed. Banks failed. Sofia's father worked at one of them. When it closed, her family didn't have many options left. They left the country entirely, relocating to Barcelona, Spain, to start over. Suárez was 17. The one person who'd given his life any structure was suddenly on another continent. And here's the part that should sound familiar if you know anything about who Luis Suárez became as a player. He didn't take it well. He didn't quietly accept it. By his own words, by the time she left, he'd stopped playing football altogether for a stretch. The rebel came back, angrier, according to people close to him at the time, than he'd ever been. So he did something reckless. At 19, with almost no money, he scraped together enough for a plane ticket and asked his own brother to lend him the rest. He didn't have Sofia's exact address. He didn't have a real plan beyond getting to Barcelona and finding her. This is the moment from the very start of this video. A teenager landing in a foreign country with one shirt, a nosebleed, and no way to explain to immigration why he was even there. He was detained, interrogated, and eventually put back on a plane and sent home to Uruguay, no closer to Sofia than when he left. Imagine that for a second. One of the greatest strikers who will ever play the sport, at 19 years old, getting turned away at customs because he couldn't articulate a plan more sophisticated than, "I need to find this girl." Here's where the story actually turns. Getting sent home didn't break him. It focused him completely. If he couldn't fly to Sofia on hope and a borrowed plane ticket, he'd have to earn his way there. Suárez threw himself into football with a level of intensity people around Nacional's first team hadn't seen from him before. Whatever chaos had been driving him for years, the anger at his father, the wildness, the drinking, all of it seemed to funnel into 90 minutes at a time. It worked faster than almost anyone expected. In one match, playing for Nacional, Suárez scored 4 goals in a single game. Scouts from the Dutch club Groningen were watching. They didn't hesitate. They offered him a contract, a real one, in Europe. This time, when Luis Suárez flew across the Atlantic, it wasn't with a borrowed ticket and no plan. It was with a professional contract in hand. Not long after he arrived in the Netherlands, Sofia came too. The two of them, who'd been kept apart by an economic collapse, an ocean, and one humiliating afternoon at a Spanish airport, were finally in the same country again, this time for good. From there, the football world knows the rest, or thinks it does. Groningen led to Ajax. Ajax led to a £25 million move to Liverpool. Liverpool led to Barcelona, the very city where, a decade earlier, a teenager with a bloody nose had been turned away at the border. He didn't just eventually play for a Barcelona-adjacent giant of world football. He built a career that, at its peak, ranks among the greatest any striker has ever had. Over 600 career goals, league titles across 3 different countries, a Champions League trophy, a Copa America. And every account of his career, without exception, comes back to Sofia. He married her. He said outright that she's the only person who's ever really understood him. To this day, he dedicates goals to her. But here's the thing worth sitting with, if you've made it this far. The rage that got a 19-year-old detained at a Spanish airport never fully disappeared. It just found a new outlet. The same intensity, unfiltered and occasionally uncontrollable, is the exact same fire that would later get him banned from a World Cup for biting an opponent, not once, but multiple times across his career. Football didn't erase the wild kid from Montevideo. It gave him a legal place to put him. That's what makes this story different from the tidy, triumphant version people usually tell. Luis Suárez isn't a story about a poor kid who worked hard and made good, clean and simple. It's the story of a genuinely angry, directionless teenager who happened to fall in love with exactly the right person at exactly the right time, and who spent the rest of his career playing with the same fire that once got him sent home from an airport in handcuffs of paperwork instead of steel. That's the real story behind the man they call El Pistolero. If this is the first video of ours you've seen, this is Beyond the Badge. We tell the real, complicated stories behind football's biggest names, not just the highlight reel version. Ronaldo, Messi and Neymar are already up. Subscribe now, because we're not done.